Welcome once again, my fellow manipulators of digital fate. I'm Richie, this is Capricorn, and we have another spoiler season video for Bloomburrow. This is spoiler season day 8. Feels like the spoiler season that just never ends, but I do think we're getting towards the tail end, right? I think we've got like 1 or 2 days left. This is day 8. We have a ton of cards to go over today. A bunch of common reprints were announced as well, so we'll touch on those very quickly, but we're going to focus on some of the meat and potatoes, you know, the rares and the good stuff. So we're going to get right to it. Before we do, make sure you like the video if you haven't already. It's you guys liking every video that has helped this channel to grow so quickly. Screamed right past 10K subscribers. Thank you so much for all of the help. It means the world to me. If you're new here, make sure you subscribe so you never miss an upload. Tons of crazy spoiler content, some really ridiculous ideas for Bloomburrow standard brews in my head right now. We're going to try those out during early access, a 24-hour marathon stream happening on Wednesday, July 24th. Twitch.tv/quarantined Capricorn for that, because if I'm alive and I'm breathing, I'm there and I'm streaming. Now that I got all the hullabaloo out of the way, let's just jump right into the cards because we have a lot to go over. First of all, we've got Calamitous Tide, 2 blue and 4 for a sorcery. Return up to 2 target creatures to their owner's hands, draw 2 cards, then discard a card. This isn't anything great, right? But if you are a little bit short on removal or card advantage in your limited deck, this might make your 22nd, 23rd card as a way to get extra value in the late game. It is really expensive though, so I highly doubt you run more than 1. That being said, being able to bounce 2 things and draw 2 cards could be really good. If it's in the deck where you want to return your own creatures to your hand, right? You could slow them down, you could bounce something to your hand. A lot of cool stuff you could do, but 6 mana is an awful lot. Next up, we've got Heirloom Epic. 1 mana for an artifact. You can pay 4, tap it, draw a card. For each mana in this ability's activation cost, you may tap an untapped creature you control rather than pay that mana. Activate only as a sorcery. This means you could just tap 4 token creatures and this and draw a card for no mana. That seems really good for just, you know, something that comes down just for 1 anyway. Obviously, you want to be in just the right archetype to take advantage of that. And in limited, I think in the right archetypes, whether it be rat tokens or rabbit tokens or whatever the case may be, I think this card could be really good if you're deep enough into that. But even outside of limited, I wonder if this card might be constructed worthy. I'm leaning towards no. But I've seen crazier things happen. It's possible that there is an insane go-wide deck that just uses this for incredibly cheap card draw. Boros Convoke, maybe? I don't know if it's worth a slot in that because that deck just wants to finish the game super quick before it needs to draw cards like this. But I wouldn't be surprised if there's some kind of standard deck that rears its ugly head that actually wants to use a card like this. It's possible. Next up, we've got Coiling Rebirth. 2 black and 3 for a sorcery. You may gift a card as you cast it, which means you promise a gift to your opponent, and they get to then draw a card before the rest of the card resolves, which is kind of interesting. You return target creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield. Then, if the gift was promised and that creature isn't legendary, you create a token that's a copy of it, except it's a 1/1. So I've seen some people down on this. I've also seen some people misread this. You can bring back a legendary creature with this. You can bring back your Atali or your Atraxa or whatever. You're just not able to gift a card and create a token, right? You don't get a copy of it. That being said, you don't have to gift the card if you're not getting the copy. So this can just be a 5 mana normal reanimate spell for even legendaries. But if you bring back a non-legendary, you get this opportunity to let your opponent draw a card and make an additional copy of whatever you brought back. That's just a 1/1. Now, on the surface, that doesn't seem like it's a great deal, but there are some really cool targets that I think are awesome, such as the 6-drop vampire dude that drains for 2 every time something dies. What is that card called? Why am I forgetting it off the top of my head? I use it so much. It was one of my favorite cards. Let me know in the comments. I'm just blanking. I know the card. I've used it so many times, but I'm just blanking. But that card's perfect for this. And then also there's a new card in this set the Viper that does crazy, ridiculous sacrifice stuff when it enters the battlefield. Requires your opponent, I believe, to pay 4 life unless they sacrifice a non-land permanent or discard a card equal to the amount of blight counters on it. Enters with a blight counter, gets more blight counters every turn. Getting 2 of those seems like it would be kind of crazy. I went over that card in the last spoiler video, so definitely check out the older videos to get caught up if you don't know what card I'm talking about. But there are a lot of interesting possibilities for a card like this that might not be obvious at first, but would be really good. So I do think this is a little bit better than some people have been treating it, and I would not be surprised to see this actually, you know, pop up in a standard deck post-rotation. Next up we have Splash Portal, 1 blue mana for a sorcery. Exile target creature you control, then return it to the battlefield under its owner's control. If that creature is a bird, frog, otter, or rat, draw a card. So not only do you get to flicker for 1 mana, and it brings the thing back right away, not at end of turn, but you also get to draw a card if it's the right kind of creature. That seems crazy. Sure, it's not instant speed, but it's 1 mana, and it comes back right away. You don't have to wait until end of turn. This is perfect for flicker decks to re-trigger, you know, enters the battlefield abilities and stuff like that, and then draw a card to boot. This card seems crazy. In the right deck, it's crazy. It obviously has to be in the right deck. It can't be used at instant speed to save a creature from removal, and that tends to be one of the better ways to use flicker effects. Even if you are trying to trigger your ETBs again, being able to also save something and then in the process of saving it from removal also trigger the ETB could be really strong. So this isn't just insane, right? There is a downside. That being said, even if it is sorcery speed, 1 mana to re-trigger your ETBs and draw an extra card seems like it's really good. So I like this. Next up we have Honored. Man, I'm such a dummy. Honored. Honored starts with the silent H, Richard. Honored Dray Leader. 1 green and 2 for a 1/1 squirrel warrior with trample, and when it enters, you put a +1/+1 counter on it for each other squirrel and or food you control. And whenever another squirrel or food you control enters, you put a +1/+1 counter on Honored Dray Leader. This is really good, especially in Limited. I don't know if it's going to quite make the cut in Constructed because it is a fair bit of mana and then also requires jumping through some hoops to get what you need. But even in Constructed, even in Standard, this could make a splash. I love that it's getting all of the counters for all of the squirrels and all of the food, no matter if they're on the board before you play this or after. So you don't have to worry about sequencing things out perfectly in order to get all of the value off of this. If you wait until turn 7 to play this thing, you're getting all of the value for all of the squirrels and all of the foods that are on the battlefield. You're still getting all of those counters. But likewise, if you get this out turn 2 by ramping with a turn 1 mana dork or whatever, like, it's still gonna get all of those +1/+1 counters that it would have gotten if you waited until turn 7. It's just gonna get them as you play your squirrels and your foods and stuff. So I like that about this, and I like that it's a squirrel, because obviously it's gonna get the squirrel tribal payoffs. So it's possible this could see play in Standard. It's absolutely gonna be a backbone card for Limited, and you're gonna want to pick this super high if you're in the squirrel deck. Next up we have Hoarders Overflow. 1 red and 1 for an enchantment, and when it enters, and whenever you expend 4, you put a stash counter on it. Then you can pay 2 mana and sacrifice it, discard your hand, draw cards equal to the number of stash counters on Hoarders Overflow. Nice little card here. It's only 2 mana. It comes in with at least 1 stash counter no matter what. What I really like about this is the fact that the expend 4 doesn't require you to pay extra mana, jump through any crazy hoops. It's just every time you basically tap 4 or more, you know, pay 4 or more mana into playing spells, it's just going to automatically trigger. It's just going to be an extra thing. And it's just going to stack up these stash counters, and then eventually when you're out of gas, you can sack it for another measly 2 mana and redraw a whole hand pretty much. So is it good enough? I don't know. It seems a little bit slow for Constructed. I think in Limited, it might be a really cool way to just gas up on a ton of cards, especially if you're in the deck that's trying to just curve out with bigger creatures, and so you're able to cast more things more turns in a row that hit that expend 4. it could be really good. So jury's out, but I'm really excited to test it, and it could be amazing in limited. It might even see play in constructed, but it's really hard to tell. Next up, we have Portant of Calamity. 1 blue and X for a sorcery. Reveal the top X cards of your library. For each card type, you may exile a card of that type from among them. Put the rest into your graveyard. Put the rest into your graveyard. You may cast a spell from among the exiled cards without paying its mana cost if you exiled 4 or more cards this way. Then put the rest of the exiled cards into your hand. Interesting. So, the wider you go for card types, the more potential things you can draw. And then the more mana that you spend, the deeper you can dig in your deck to potentially find more of those card types and potentially draw more things. That being said, it's not a definite, right? You could pay 7 mana and just whiff and get, you know, hit all creatures or all sorceries or something and only get 1 card. That being said, as long as you pay at least, what is it, 4 for X, so a total of 5 mana. If you're paying at least a total of 5 mana, you get to cast something for free. That seems really good. I think this one's really tricky to evaluate. I think it has a lot of potential. I think on the surface it looks like it requires a lot of mana to really do what you want to do. But in reality, if you're going wide enough on card types and you can increase the consistency of hitting different card types, I think just playing this, you know, as a 5-drop and getting to free cast something and put cards into your hand could be really, really good. It has to be in just the right deck where the consistency and the chances of this really popping off are going to go up. But in that deck where you have a lot of bomb targets to free cast off this, and all of those targets are different card types to maximize the synergy, I think this could be crazy. I don't know. I feel like there's definitely something I'm overlooking about this card, so if you have ideas about what you'd play with this card, definitely let me know in the comments, because I feel like the potential is definitely there, but it's really hard to envision exactly what to do with this card without actually testing it out. Next up, we've got Feed the Cycle. 1 black and 1 for an instant. As an additional cost to cast it, you either forage or pay an extra black, and then you destroy target creature or planeswalker. So this is a strictly better murder. It's instant speed removal of a creature or planeswalker for 2 black and 1, which is already pretty good. But then, if you have the ability to forage, which means either sack a food or exile any 3 cards from your graveyard, which in the right decks could be very negligible cost to pay, you can just play it for 2 mana at instant speed. That seems really, really good, right? The floor is great, and it just gets even better from there. So I think this card might be, I don't know, I think this card might be staple removal moving forward. Definitely in decks where you're going to be able to consistently forage, this is gonna see a lot of play. I don't know what those decks are, but if they exist where the consistency of being able to have plenty of cards to exile from your graveyard or food tokens or whatever the case may be, this will definitely be a 4 of in those decks. So if you have ideas about what those decks will be, definitely let me know in the comments. But next up, we've got Otter Ball Antics. 1 blue and 1 for a sorcery. Create a 1/1 blue and red otter creature token with prowess, and if this spell was cast from anywhere other than your hand, you also put a +1/+1 counter on that creature. And then it has flashback for 1 blue and 3. So the obvious way to get value off this is you just get a 1/1 prowess for 2 mana, and then later in the game, you flash it back for 4, and you get a 2/2 prowess guy, right? But if you can find other synergies, other ways to just cast this from other places, like, you know, some of those red spells that exile things and let you play it until the end of your next turn, stuff like that, you play it from exile, even the 2 mana version is going to get the extra counter, and making a 2/2 prowess for 2 mana seems really good. So any ways that you can extra, you know, add extra synergy to this by, you know, getting opportunities to play it from places other than your hand even before you flashback it, seems like it could make this card really good. I definitely feel like it's supposed to be in the Izzet deck with cards that give you card advantage by exiling the top, however, and letting you play them. So is that going to be a deck in Standard? It might be good enough now. I feel like the opportunity to have that deck exist has existed for a while, but hasn't quite been there. Next up, we have Starforged Sword. 4 mana for an artifact equipment. You may gift a tapped fish as you play it. And when Starforged Sword enters, if the gift was promised, you just get to attach it to any creature you control for free. Equipped creature gets +3/+3 and loses flying, and it equips for 3. So you don't have to give them a tapped fish. You don't have to give them a tapped 1/1 token if you don't want to. It just comes in as a 3/3 buff that you have to pay the 3 mana to equip, and that's a little rough. But if you are willing to gift them the tapped fish, you know, it can attach for free and just be pretty big buff that can then be moved later on in the game if the thing that it's equipping is, you know, dies or whatever the case may be. That being said, it is expensive. The reason it's expensive is because it's colorless. You can slot it into literally anything. You could slot it into the token deck, which is where I think this is going to really shine with like rabbit tokens or rat tokens or whatever the case may be. So this deck might want that, right? That deck might want this. Yeah. Loses flying is pretty rough when the card's already so expensive. But again, it's colorless. It slots into anything. I don't think the card is that great, but there might be a deck that can take advantage of it. Next up, we've got Dowport Mage. 1 blue and 1 for a 1/3 frog wizard. Whenever one or more other creatures you control leave the battlefield without dying, you get to draw a card. And then you can pay 1 blue and 1 and tap it, return another target creature you control to its owner's hand. So this is another really, really good card for Frog Tribal that lets you return your own stuff to your own hand, to replay it, to get more ETB triggers, to get triggers off of your other creatures that are in play that care about you casting a creature, stuff like that, which, you know, Frog Tribal is pretty much solely trying to do with its archetype. But then you have this extra ability that anytime something leaves the battlefield, one of yours leaves the battlefield, without dying, you get to draw a card. So just using this ability to return something, the tap ability, is going to let you draw a card. But then all the other synergies that you have in that Frog Tribal deck that are returning things to your hand are also going to trigger this. And then there might be ways to actually trigger this that don't involve bouncing the creature to your hand and still get to draw a card, because it's whenever it leaves the battlefield without dying, right? So if they have exile removal, you get to draw cards, which is kind of cool. It's almost like it's almost like hate for exile removal, right? If they use like a banishing light or something on your creature, it technically leaves the battlefield without dying, so you draw a card. So there's some extra synergy here, some extra value kind of buried deep that you might not notice at first, and I think that makes the card really cool. I'm looking forward to just trying to brew Frog Tribal, because I think the idea is really cool about what it's trying to be. That being said, I have no idea what that deck looks like. I just know a handful of cards that are going to be really good in it. So this is probably one of them. Next up, we have Blacksmith's Talent. 1 red mana for an enchantment class, and when it enters, you create a colorless equipment artifact token named Sword that equips for 2 and gives equipped creature +1/+1. So it's another 1 mana enchantment that gives you an artifact token on ETB, which is really good by itself in the right decks, regardless of what the enchantment and artifact do. In this case, it's an equipment. But you can also pay 1 red mana and 2 colorless to level it up to level 2, and then at the beginning of combat on your turn, you get to attach target equipment you control to up to 1 target creature you control. So every turn, you get a free equip, which is really nice. And then for 1 red and 3, you level it up to level 3, and then during your turn, equipped creatures you control have double strike and haste. Man, they really want you to go deep into Equipment Tribal, right? They want equipment decks to be a thing. Will this be the card that finally pushes those decks over the edge? Hard to say, but I'm rooting for equipment decks. They've been trying literally every set. Equipment decks have got support, and literally every time, it's not quite been enough for the deck to be a viable contender in Standard. But I'm waiting for the other shoe to drop. At some point, that's going to happen. Will this be the card that does it? Or maybe this in conjunction with a couple of other equipment support cards in this set? Possibly. If this cares about equipment this deeply, then there's probably other cards that really care about equipment too. So, I'm crossing my fingers. I'm really rooting for that deck to be a thing, just because they've been trying to make it a thing for so long. There's so many cards in every single standard set that's released for like the last 3 or 4 years, and it just never quite gets there. So hopefully, there's a lot of value to be had with this one. Next up, we've got 𝐻𝐷𝐼 Crab. This is 2 blue and 5 for a 5/5 elemental crab with flash. It costs 1 less to cast for each instant and sorcery card in your graveyard. It enters tapped if it's not your turn, and when it enters, you tap up to 2 target creatures. So, basically, if you can get 5 instants or sorceries into your graveyard, this can enter the battlefield on your opponent's turn for just 2 mana, tap down their 2 biggest creatures so that they can't swing in, and then you immediately untap and get to swing with a 5/5 while their 2 best blockers are still tapped down. That can be a lot of value, right? But you can also just play it on your turn if you top deck it and you just want to take 2 of their creatures, you know, out of contention as far as blocks. You can just play it right away. You can still play it for just the 2 mana if you have enough cards in your graveyard, and immediately still tap down the 2 things. It won't enter tapped if you do that, which means you can hold it up as a blocker, which is pretty cool. So there's some versatility in how you can play this. I like it. I think it's going to be a fun inclusion in just the right decks in Limited. I don't know if it's good enough in Constructed, but if there's a deck that fills up the graveyard with instant sorceries quick enough, I mean, I've seen a lot worse than, you know, a 2 mana 5/5. So it could see play in Standard. We'll have to wait and see, but I think the Otter deck definitely wants to run at least one of these at the top end. Next up, we've got Builder's Talent, another enchantment class for 1 white and 1. When it enters, you create a 0/4 white wall creature token with Defender. So, already pretty good. 2 permanents for 1 card for 2 mana, and it's, you know, a 0/4 that's going to really help you stave off aggression, early aggro decks. But you can level it up to level 2 for just 1 white mana, and when you do, whenever 1 or more non-creature, non-land permanents you control enter the battlefield, you put a +1/+1 counter on target creature you control. That seems really good. All of your non-creature permanents are now just handing out +1/+1 counters like they're candy, and it only costs 1 extra mana to get there. I kind of love that. You can even just put counters on your 0/4 wall to make it a better blocker if you really want to, if you're desperate. And then for 1 white and 4, you can level it up to level 3, and then when this class becomes level 3, you return target non-creature, non-land permanent card from your graveyard to the battlefield. This seems really good. It definitely wants to be in a deck that runs a lot of non-creature permanents that can then make creatures, so that you get the most possible value out of this. You can trigger level 2 as many times as possible, have the best opportunities to trigger level 3, and still have the ability to go wide with a bunch of creatures to get those +1/+1 counters. So does this go in like a Super Friends deck with a whole bunch of planeswalkers that have loyalty abilities that make creatures? Maybe. Does it go in a deck with enchantments or artifacts that make creatures when they're played? Does it maybe go into a battle deck, where when the battles flip, they become the creatures that can get the +1/+1 counters, but when you play the battles initially, they're non-creature spells, so they can put counters on the battles that have already flipped? It's an idea. We might try that deck. I don't know, but there's a lot of potential with this, you know, getting a really good defender early to stop aggression, and then just very, very cheap value with just that 1 mana letting you start to pile up counters on things, and then card advantage later on in the game by paying 5 and just getting your best non-land permanent back does seem really good. So I would be surprised if this doesn't show up somewhere. I'm just not 100% sure what deck wants it, so if you've got ideas, let me know in the comments. Next up, we've got Festival of Embers. 1 red and 4 for an enchantment. During your turn, you may cast instant and sorcery spells from your graveyard by paying 1 life, in addition to their other costs. If a card or token would be put into your graveyard from anywhere, you exile it instead, but you can pay 1 red and 1 to sacrifice Festival of Embers. So, if you're worried about the cards that you're playing going to your graveyard, and you don't want them to go to your graveyard, at any point you can just pay the 2 mana and sack this thing, get it off the board, so that stuff can start going to your graveyard again. I'm not sure how much we care about that, or what deck would care about that, but it's nice that it has a little back door, you know, an out for if this thing becomes a problematic permanent. That being said, just being able to recast everything from the graveyard just for 1 life a spell seems kind of crazy. It reminds me a little bit of like Leer and things like that. Is it gonna be good enough? I don't know. It doesn't have a body attached to it, right? You can only play so many things because of the exile clause. It's possible maybe you sack this so that you can play a bunch of stuff from your hand and it goes to the graveyard again and then play a second copy. Or maybe you have a way to like get something back from the graveyard after you sack this so that you can start to get value again. I don't know. There's a lot of different directions this could go. I don't know if any of them are actually worth exploring. But I mean, the ceiling is pretty high, right? The possibility of basically having a Leer that's harder to remove, that they can't get rid of with creature removal, does seem tempting. So I don't know. If you have ideas about how best to use this card, definitely let me know in the comments. There's potential, but it seems really, really tricky to jump through all the hoops. Next up, we have Mind Whisker, 1 blue and 2 for a 3/2 rat wizard. At the beginning of your upkeep, you surveil 1, and it has Threshold, so as long as 7 or more cards are in your graveyard, creatures your opponents control get -1/-0. Just a blanket effect there if you have Threshold. I kind of love that. So no matter what, when this is on the battlefield, every turn you get to surveil 1, and then as soon as your graveyard's full enough, which you can help to enable with surveilling, your opponent's whole team is just nerfed. I kind of love that. This would be a great card to be able to get multiple copies of in Limited specifically. If you can get 2 of these onto the field, maybe you manage to draft 3 and you've got 3 in your deck and you can get to a point where you get a second copy on the field, that would be disgusting. Not only are you digging for your most valuable cards, but you are giving the entire board -2/-0. And it's not even the entire board, right? It's just the stuff your opponents control. It doesn't affect your creatures. So I think all of this is really good on the back of a 3-power creature for 3 mana. That's fine. I mean, that's not a great rate, but it's fine when you take into account the 2 abilities that it has. I think if it was missing either one of those abilities, it would be a little bit more meh. But with both of them on a 3-power creature for 3 mana, I actually think this card is really good. I think the Rat tribal deck is probably going to want this pretty high and probably pick it pretty high. But next up, we've got Baker's Bane Duo, 1 green and 1 for a 2/2 squirrel raccoon, and when it enters, you create a food token. And also, whenever you expend 4, it gets +1/+1 until end of turn. I kind of like this. It's an immediate 2 for 1, gives you a food token and a 2/2 for 2 mana. The food token's actually way more relevant in this set than it normally would be outside of this set because of forage. And then the expend 4 just happens sometimes. You don't have to pay extra mana, you don't have to jump through any hoops. It's just sometimes you spent enough mana playing spells and this thing happens, and it was a 2 mana 3/3 instead. So that seems really good. As a common, I think this is one of the better commons we've seen. It's got immediate advantage, and it's got this nice little bit of extra silver lining value that just happens with almost 0 opportunity cost. I kind of love expend because of that. So cool little card here. It's also nice that it's both a squirrel and a raccoon. That actually makes it even better. I forgot this was a duo. Yeah, the duo cards are much, much better than a normal creature because they can slot into either tribal or sometimes give you the opportunity to, you know, slot into both tribal in the same deck and then get double the payoffs on a duo. So being a squirrel and a raccoon here, super, super good. Next up, we've got Blooming Blast. 1 red and 1 for an instant. When you play it, you may gift a treasure, which is interesting, and it's not a tapped treasure, so they can use the mana right away. Be careful of that. In fact, you could give them a treasure, and then before the rest of the card resolves, they could use the treasure to play a counterspell, and then counter the Blooming Blast. So, be very, very careful gifting a treasure like this, especially against blue. But Blooming Blast deals 2 damage to target creature, and if the gift was promised, it also deals 3 damage to that creature's controller. So I don't think most of the time you're going to want to give the gift, but if you're in an aggro enough deck where that 3 damage is really going to matter, you probably do it, right? Especially if it's the final 3 damage you need to just take them out of the game and win. So I like having the opportunity, you know, I like having it as an option. It does make the card strictly better than just a 2 mana, 2 damage removal spell at instant speed. but I don't see myself actually gifting the treasure very often. Sometimes it will happen though, and it will feel good when it does. Next up, we've got Fountain Port. Pretty crazy new rare land. It's a colorless land. It does enter the battlefield untapped. It taps for a colorless mana, and you can pay 2 tap it to and sack a token to draw a card. You can also pay 3 tap it, pay a life to create a 1/1 blue fish creature token. You can also pay 4 and tap it to create a treasure token. This card does kind of everything. It reminds me a lot of Charms, and it reminds me a lot of the example I use as far as the versatility of Charms making up for each mode of a charm being slightly underwhelming for the amount of mana you're paying for a charm. This kind of gives me the same vibe, where this seems a little bit expensive, right? Everything that's happening here is probably more than you want to be able to, be paying for the thing. That being said, it's all just extra value. It's all kind of free, and it's colorless, so it can kind of slot into any deck. You don't have to worry about slowing down your tempo because it doesn't enter the battlefield tapped, and you have that versatility, right? Like a charm, so you can do the best thing depending on what, situation you're in that turn. If you really just need to draw into removal to kill their bomb or the game's over, you could start sacking your tokens to draw cards. If you just need a chump blocker to survive long enough to do a thing, you can make a token. If you just need an extra mana so that next turn you can jam a Traxa or something like that, you can create a treasure token. So, at the end of the day, is it good enough to see play in Constructed in Standard specifically? I'm leaning towards no, but there's potential. There's certainly potential, especially if you have ways of reducing the cost of these activated abilities. If you can get these for really, really cheap, it could be awesome. That being said, in Limited, this card is awesome. And another place that I think this card could shine is in Commander, because of the nature of Commander being a little bit slower and being a Highlander format. I think having just one of your lands in the deck being this Fountain Port and getting access to, all of these abilities for when you're potentially out of gas could be really good. So I think this might see play in Commander as well. But next up, we've got Starscape Cleric. 1 black and 1 for a 2/1 Bat Cleric with flying. It can't block. Whenever you gain life, each opponent loses a life, and it also has Offspring 1 black and 2. This is a lot to unpack. So, I mean, a 2/1 flyer that can't block for 2 mana, that's just swinging in every turn, is already kind of okay. It sucks that it can't block, but it kind of makes up for that by the fact that you're going to be able to ping them for an extra damage whenever you gain life. So if you're in the life gain deck, this is kind of swinging for 3 every turn, in a way, right? Except it can trigger multiple times per turn. Every single time you gain life, each opponent loses a life. I'm starting to come around with this card. This might just slot right into the life gain deck, and because you're gaining so much life with most of the cards in the life gain deck anyway, you don't really care that this thing can't block. You don't really want to trade it anyway. It's just dishing out a ton of damage. Every single time you have a life gain trigger, you get to make them lose a life. So it really speeds up the clock and also swings for 2 in the air every turn. As if that wasn't enough, later in the game you can just spend 5 mana and get 2 of them, and then whenever you gain life, they lose 2. That seems crazy. The more I think about it, the more I think this card is bananas. It absolutely goes into Bat Tribal in Limited, but this is going to be insane in Standard life gain decks, I think. If you have enough consistent ways to gain life, this is just nuts. This is just a crazy automatic clock. This is like, in some situations, better than Sheoldred. I'm not going to say it's just strictly better than Sheoldred. It obviously isn't. Sheoldred is the card in Standard right now and probably will be for the next year. But if you're in the life gain deck, if you're in the right archetype and you're deep enough into it, this can be better than Sheoldred. For 1 extra mana, you're getting to make them lose 2 life every single life gain trigger. That's bananas. That's just crazy. And then it can just be played earlier as well if, you don't want to wait and spend 5. I don't know. The more I think about this card, the more I love it. It does suck that it can't block, but like I said earlier, if you're gaining a bunch of life in a life gain deck, you don't care that it can't block. You don't want to trade this thing away anyway. So I kind of love this. yeah, we're gonna do Bat Tribal, and it's gonna be awesome. And we're gonna do a life gain deck, and that's gonna be awesome. They might even be the same deck, I'm not sure, but we're gonna brew it, and we're gonna play it during early access. It's what I'm most looking forward to right now. Next up, we've got Giant Growth. This is another reprint, and I'm not entirely certain if this is actually in the base set. I know there are a number of, you know, common, uncommon reprints that we saw today, and I think some of them are in like the default decks that you get after rotation. And I think that might be what this is. That being said, it might still be in the packs. I'm not sure. If you guys know, let me know in the comments. But I'm not going to remind you guys with every single reprint that that's the case. But just to let you know, as a blanket statement for all of the reprints, when I bring up that they're a reprint, there's a chance it's not actually in the pack. I'm not 100% sure. But like I said, if you guys know, let me know in the comments. Giant Growth, nice little trick. Instant speed, 1 mana, pumps up your dude, can protect them during combat, can get through for the damage you need. It's a staple combat trick. It'll be useful. Next up, we've got Agate Assault. 1 red and 2 for a sorcery. You choose one. Agate Assault deals 4 damage to target creature. If that creature would die this turn, you exile it instead. Or you exile target artifact. This is fine, honestly, as common removal, as that thing where if you're getting late in the draft and you haven't picked up enough removal yet, you can fill in that removal slot you're missing with a, you know, a late pack Agate Assault, and it's fine. 3 mana, 4 damage, or an optional ability to exile an artifact. Also a really nice way of fitting artifact removal into your main deck so that it's not a waste of a card, because if they don't have an artifact to hit, you can at least kill a somewhat relevant creature with that 4 damage, so pretty cool little common. Next up, we have Serra Redeemer. This is another reprint, and like I said before, might not be in the base set, might not be in the packs, not entirely sure. But 2 white and 3 for a 2/4 Angel Soldier with flying. Whenever another creature you control with power 2 or less enters, put 2 +1/+1 counters on that creature. This is a card that I really wanted to use when it was first released into Standard, and it just wasn't quite there. The decks that I would put it in, it just wasn't quite good enough to make the cut in those decks, and so I never actually ended up using it in Standard, but I always thought the idea was super fun, and I really wanted to, so I'm hoping this go around, maybe Standard is right for actually being able to use this in a deck. The idea that all of your creatures in the deck being power 2 and being able to come in and get extra counters off of this guy seems crazy. You can also get multiple copies of Serra Redeemer to trigger each other and give each other counters, which seems kind of crazy. So maybe if there's a way to like have the next creature you play get Offspring or something like that, that could be really cool in conjunction with Serra Redeemer. Just spitballing here, but I'm glad it's back. I'm glad we have the opportunity, you know, to actually try to make this work in Standard again, because we didn't really manage to the first time. Next up, we've got Bellowing Crier. 1 blue and 1 for a 2/1 Frog Advisor, and when it enters, you draw a card and then discard a card. Another filler common, right? If you desperately need a 2-drop creature to fill out your curve, you could do worse than this, and it's going to get you a little bit of extra value. It's going to get you some extra value when it enters the battlefield by letting you loot, so not awful. A little bit better in the Surveil decks and the Forage decks because it helps fill up your graveyard, you know. A little bit better with Threshold and things like that, so nice little filler common. Next up, we've got Druid of the Spade. 1 green and 2 for a 2/3 Rabbit Druid, and as long as you control a token, Druid of the Spade gets +2/+0 and has Trample. That's actually pretty good. It's a 4/3 Trampler for 3 mana, just as long as you have a token. And rabbits are known for tokens, and it's a rabbit. And it will get rabbit payoffs if there are any like rabbit lords or stuff like that. So I actually think this guy is a really good common. I think if you're really deep into Rabbit Tribal and you have tons of token creation, he's a no-brainer. You slam him, you try to get extra copies, right? And really good in draft if you're in just the right deck. So I like this card. Next up, we've got Scavenger's Talent. 1 black for an enchantment class. This one is a rare class, which we haven't seen too many of. Most of them have been uncommon. But 1 black mana, whenever 1 or more creatures you control die, you create a food token. This ability triggers only once each turn though. So every turn you can get a food token if something you control dies. Sure. For an extra 1 black and 1, it levels up to level 2, and then whenever you sack a permanent, target player mills 2 cards. So now all of your sacrifices start turning into a win condition by milling out your opponent. You could also self-mill yourself. That's kind of interesting, right? Sack your permanents for sacrifice payoffs, choose yourself to mill to fill up your graveyard with stuff you need, maybe Threshold or stuff like that. Level 3, you can pay 1 black and 2 to level it up to level 3. And keep in mind, the other 2 abilities are still, are still active, still online. I mean, you're going to get both of those regardless of the fact that it's, level 3 now. At the beginning of your end step, you may sacrifice 3 other non-land permanents. If you do, return a creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield with a finality counter on it. So at the end of every turn, you get to just return any big creature from your graveyard straight to the battlefield, granted with a finality counter, if you can sacrifice 3 other non-land permanents. It doesn't even have to be creatures, and it doesn't have to be non-token, right? Just non-land. So you could sack map tokens, you could sack whatever you want. I think sacrifice decks are gonna love this card, especially at how cheap it comes down. I don't know exactly where this card goes yet, but there is a deck for this card, and that deck is going to be awesome, and you're going to self-mill yourself, and you're going to be pulling out creatures every turn, and you're going to get crazy sacrifice payoffs that are also letting you self-mill yourself, and it's going to get wild. I just don't know what that deck is, so if you do, let me know in the comments. We're going to figure it out during early access for sure. We're going to figure out what that deck is, but right now, I have no idea. Next up, we've got Flam Lash. 1 red and 3 for an instant, deals 4 damage to any target. I think this is also one of those reprints. Nice little bit of removal if you're desperate in limited. Banishing Light, another reprint. 1 white and 2 for an enchantment. When it enters, exile target non-land permanent opponent controls until Banishing Light leaves the battlefield. Again, another reprint. It's fine. It'll be good in limited for sure. You're gonna need stuff like this. Just nice filler removal at the common slot that you can pick up easy if your deck needs removal. Next up, we've got Colossification, another reprint. This one's a rare. 2 green and 5 for an aura, enchants a creature. When it enters, you tap the enchanted creature, and the enchanted creature gets +20/+20. It's expensive. It makes your guy really big, but you can't attack with him yet. You have to wait an entire turn cycle, which means your opponent's just going to kill him before you can. So there's that. It's Colossification. We'll see if it actually sees play at all. But next up, we've got Charmed Sleep, another reprint, another one I'm not sure if it's in the booster. 2 blue and 1, enchantment aura, enchants a creature. When it enters, tap that creature. Creature doesn't untap during its controller's untap steps. So your standard blue removal, right, that you're gonna pick up for limited. If you're, you don't have enough removal in the deck and you're really grasping at options late in the draft, you can just grab one of these. Next up, we've got Rabid Bite, another piece of common removal that's a reprint. 1 green and 1 for a sorcery. Target creature you control deals damage equal to its power to target creature you don't control. This card's fine. I mean, a bite effect rather than a fight effect is much better for green for removal. Again, this is just another card that fills in your removal if you're, light on removal as you're drafting, so it'll fill that slot. But next up, we've got another rare, Gev Scaled Scorch. 2 mana in the colors of Rakdos for a 3/2 legendary lizard mercenary. Has ward, pay 2 life, and other creatures you control enter with an additional +1/+1 counter on them for each opponent who lost life this turn. Also has, whenever you cast a lizard spell, Gev Scaled Scorch deals 1 damage to target opponent. So this is a mercenary. It does count as an outlaw. That being said, I don't know if you actually want to run this in some kind of an outlaw tribal deck in standard. When I was first reading this, that's where my head was going at first, and I was getting excited. But then that last ability only triggers off lizards, and that's probably the best ability on the card. So I think this card is really trying to push you into lizard tribal. Specifically, I think this might be one of the staple cards that exist to try to make lizard tribal a thing in standard. Will it actually be good enough to be a thing in Standard? I don't know, but if it is, this will probably be a part of it. A 3-2 for 2 is a pretty darn good on-rate place to start. Having the ward be something that helps aggro decks and just punishes the opponent with even more life loss is super nice. And then, you know, you get extra counters on everything as long as someone's lost life this turn. And if you're playing this in Commander and you make multiple opponents lose life, your creatures are going to enter with multiple extra counters, and that seems kind of cool. But like I said, the meat and potatoes here is every lizard you cast is going to deal 1 damage to the opponent. And then subsequently, I think that damage will trigger the ability to get the counter off the other abilities. So a lot of crazy synergy here if you're in the lizard deck. I hope that deck's a real thing because this card's cool and deserves to see play in Standard. And it would be really awesome if the lizard deck was real and mono red wasn't so dominant, right? Next up, we've got Rabbit Response. Play on words, obviously. 2 white and 2 for an instant. Creatures you control get +2/+1 until end of turn, and if you control a rabbit, you also get to scry 2. This is your normal, common, you know, helps win the game after your board is wide type of trick. But getting to scry 2 is a nice little bit of extra value. Card's not great. It's your 23rd card if you're desperate, if you just need that one top-end win condition thing that helps your go wide creature deck that consists of creatures that aren't that great and need to be buffed. So, very narrow in what you want to use this in, and you definitely only want to run 1 copy, but it'll see some play. Next up, we have Alania's Pathmaker, 1 red and 3 for a 4/2 Otter Wizard. And when it enters, you get to exile the top card of your library, and until the end of your next turn, you may play that card. And it's just a 4/2 for 4. So, again, this is common filler for if you come up lacking in your Otter deck, you can at least get some value. It's sort of like a Flame Tongue Kavoo, except it doesn't kill anything, it gets you card advantage instead. It's fine. It'll slot into Otter decks that are desperate for a 4-drop. Next up, we've got Fecund Greenshell, our first turtle, I believe. This is a 4/6 elemental turtle with reach for 2 green and 3. And as long as you control 10 or more lands, creatures you control get +2/+2. So this absolutely wants to go into a ramp deck. It's a really good blocker as it is, being a 4/6 with reach that then double anthems as soon as you reach enough lands. But whenever Fecund Greenshell or another creature you control with toughness greater than its power enters, you get to look at the top card of your library. If it's a land, you put it onto the battlefield tapped, otherwise put it into your hand. So it has automatic card advantage. It just comes out, at the very least you draw the card. If that card happens to be a land, it goes straight onto the battlefield instead, helps ramp you to the 10 lands that you need to turn on that +2/+2 buff. But then every creature that you play, as long as they're creatures that have greater toughness than their power, right? Which you're not going to run this in a deck that's not running only those creatures, right? But in that deck, every creature you play afterwards is going to do the same thing. It's either going to replace itself with a card in your hand or ramp a land straight onto the battlefield. So I think because of that, getting to the 10 lands you need for the double anthem seems like it's a lot harder than it actually is. It'll feel more like 7, I think, because everything you play is just gassing you up on cards or putting lands into play. As long as you're in the right deck, as long as everything has higher toughness, which, you know, should be the case. So, I don't know, the more I read this card, the more I think about this card, the more I think this actually might be viable in Standard. On the surface, it doesn't really look like it is. It looks like it's too slow. But in some kind of a new Standard ramp deck, this really could be a thing because I expect that last ability to just keep popping off and very quickly turn on that double anthem. And it's just a lot of card advantage along the way too. So, really cool card. Good to see a turtle here. Really curious if this will actually make the cut. But next up we have Nightwarl Hermit. This is a 1/4 rat rogue with vigilance for 1 blue and 2. So already a kind of decent blocker considering it's a common. It has Threshold. As long as 7 or more cards are in your graveyard, it gets +1/+0 and can't be blocked. So as soon as you hit Threshold, this is a 2/4 unblockable vigilance for 3 mana. Just for the rest of the game. For the rest of at least as long as you have at least 7 cards in your graveyard. It's just going to keep that from that point on which is crazy. That being said, you do need to get to threshold quickly to make this viable. A 1/4 isn't super good for 3 mana. It's not really where you want to be, which is why it makes sense that it's a common. But if you're in a deck that can consistently get that threshold on quickly, this card could be nuts. This can be your win condition and a big blocker, which just seems really good. So I'm excited to mess around with this card. This could be one of those cards that's just a little too slow, or it could be one of those like format defining cards that wins tons of games because it just gets turned on so easily and so easily slams in for automatic damage every turn while also making it hard for your opponent to crack back because of the vigilance. So I like this card. But next up we've got Nocturnal Hunger. 1 black and 2 for an instant. You may gift a food as you play it. You destroy target creature. If the gift wasn't promised, you lose 2 life. So just 3 mana instant removal speed. You do have to give them a food or lose 2 life. So give them 3 life in order to save yourself 2 life, which isn't great. But if you're on the back foot and you're trying to just stay alive, you might want to do that. It is also thundering out right now, so I apologize if you guys heard that. And my dog is snoring because it's raining, it's pouring, the old dog is snoring, I guess. I don't know, I'm lame. But anyway, if you're desperate for removal, this will fill that slot. We've definitely seen much better black removal in this set so far, but this is that common piece of removal where you get to the end of a draft, you realize you don't have enough removal, and you need to fill in those slots, and so you pick it up. Next up, we've got Mindspring. This might be a reprint. I don't remember this being a reprint, but it might be. It might be. This is 2 blue and X for a sorcery. Man, that thunder. You draw X cards, and that's it. It's basically Brain Geyser. See, I know this card as Brain Geyser. That's how old I am. But, Mindspring. Mindspring. Draw a lot of cards. Seems good in the ramp decks. It seems like ramp decks are still going to be a thing. Does this make the cut? Maybe. We'll see. But next up, we've got Sticky Tongue Sentinel. 1 green and 2 for a 3/3 frog warrior with reach. And when Sticky Tongue Sentinel enters, you return up to 1 other target permanent you control to its owner's hand. So this doesn't look that great, right? Having to return something seems like a downside. But again, we know that the frog deck actually wants to return its own stuff to its hand as consistently as possible, and it gets a lot of value off of that. So this could end up being one of those really, really good cards that flies under the radar. It can block flyers, it's a relevant 3/3 body for 3 mana, and it enables the synergies that you want in that deck. So if you're deep enough into, reasons to want to return creatures to your hand, this could actually be better than just a 22nd, 23rd card. But it really depends on exactly what that deck ends up looking like. Still, really cool common option. Next up, we've got Whiskerquill Scribe. 1 red and 1 for a 2/2 mouse citizen with Valiant. So whenever he becomes the target of a spell or an ability you control for the first time each turn, you may discard a card. If you do, draw a card. Now, the bummer here is you don't get to draw a card if you have no cards to discard. Sometimes these abilities are worded in a way where if you have no cards left in your hand, you can still discard 0 and draw 1. That's not the case for this. That being said, I mean, it is a common. It's supposed to be common filler at the 2-drop slot. And in that mouse deck that wants Valiant targets, this could help fill out your curve. It's not super good, but it's not useless. Next up, we have Keen-Eyed Curator. This one is super good. This is a 3/3 Raccoon Scout for just 2 green mana, so it's already a 3/3 for 2, which is kind of bananas. It has the ability to pay one mana, 1 colorless mana, so just any 1 mana at all, exile any card from any graveyard. And then as long as there are 4 or more card types among cards exiled with Keen-Eyed Curator, it gets +4/+4 and trample. This card's insane. It turns into a 2 mana 7/7 just by having 4 different card types exiled. And you can just choose to exile stuff from your own graveyard or your opponent's. So you're getting rid of key cards that the opponent wants in their graveyard, but then you realize all you need is another card type and maybe a creature will do it. So you hit your own creature in your own graveyard because your opponent doesn't have one. And that's your 4th card type, and then it just turns on the +4/+4 and you swing for 7. Like, I can see so many crazy playlines like that happening with a card like this. But then on top of that, you can use this as a really crazy enabler in stuff like Insidious Roots decks, where you're exiling stuff from your own graveyard for very cheap costs, and then you're triggering your Insidious Roots and stuff like that. You're triggering Willowgeist or whatever, and you're getting a bunch of value off of exiling things, and then also getting to the point where this gets turned on and turned into a 7/7 trampler. That's right, it gets trample when it gets buffed too. So this just seems absolutely insanely pushed. It's going to go in all of the Raccoon decks, it's going to go in all of the Graveyard Exile decks, and it's probably going to go in a new version of Mono Green Aggro or Mono Green Midrange Stompy, which might actually finally be viable again for the first time in a while in Standard. So I'm excited for all of the different kinds of decks this could slot into. It seems insane to me. It seems absolutely insane, because even just the floor is a 3/3 for 2 with upside, which just seems bonkers. But if you have ideas that I didn't nail about how you'd want to use this card, definitely let me know in the comments, because I feel like this thing just wants to be everywhere. It's so good. But next up, we've got Thieving Otter. This is another reprint, but it's a very correct reprint, a very appropriate reprint, being an actual otter. One of the only otters outside of this set to have existed before this set, right? A 2/2 otter for 1 blue and 2, and when it deals damage to an opponent, you get to draw a card. So nice way to gas up on cards if you can get through for damage. Probably want to jam it in the otter deck. Nice little reprint. Next up, we've got 3 Tree Mascot. 2 mana for a 2/1 artifact creature shapeshifter with Changeling, and you can pay 1 mana to add 1 mana of any color, but activate only once each turn. This card is really, really good. It might fly under the radar, you might not respect it enough on day 1 in your drafts, but this card is going to be format defining, I think. Changeling, a relevant 2-power, 2 mana Changeling that's decently on rate. I mean, it's not great rate, but it's at least on rate with the 2 power for 2 mana. Counts as every creature type. It slots into any tribal deck, which is going to be the backbone of Bloomburrow Limited, period. And I think that makes this really, really good to begin with, but it's also a colorless way to fix you. It lets you go into 3 colors pretty easily, play some of those crazy rare, 3-color tribal cards that we've seen floating around, and man, I just love everything about this card. Like, we needed colorless mana fixing to begin with, but the fact that we get it on a decently on-rate Changeling that's going to be able to slot into all of your tribal synergies just seems bananas to me, especially at the common rarity. And it really makes me want to try to cross-pollinate multiple tribal synergies in the same deck. Will that be viable? I don't know yet, but it'll be worth exploring for sure, and if it is, a card like this is going to be the backbone. There is one other Changeling at the very least in this set alongside this. I believe it was a 3-drop. So it's possible you could play a whole bunch of Changelings. Maybe not a whole bunch, but a handful of Changelings, and play multiple tribal payoffs and make that work for you. So I'm excited to see if that's actually something we can make happen, but I'm just excited to have Changelings in Standard again. I've missed them. It's been since Kaldheim since we've had Changelings in Standard, and I love, love, love Changelings. I love being able to pick up, multiple tribal synergies with just 1 card. So I will be brewing for sure. I don't know that this is constructed worthy at all. It probably isn't. But the potential's at least there because of the Changeling, and it'll be exciting to just mess around with it and see what we can come up with. But next up, we've got Sword of Vengeance, another rare. And the thunder continues to crack. My goodness. Is it thundering where you are? Let me know in the comments. This is 3 mana for an artifact equipment. It equips for 3 mana, which is an awful lot. But equipped creature gets +2/+0, first strike, vigilance, trample, and haste. This is kind of insane, right? Is this a reprint? I get the feeling this is a reprint. In Limited, this is going to be nuts. Like, if you play this, you probably just win, because you have a very, very difficult to deal with threat that doesn't, you can't get rid of by getting rid of the creature that it's equipped to, because you just equip it to something else. It's like an automatic clock that's really hard to deal with. But that's in limited, right? And it's a rare, so how likely are you to get it in limited? Not very. It's probably too slow for constructed. But if that equipment deck I was talking about earlier ends up being viable enough, and there are enough ways to reduce the cost of playing equipments or equipping equipments, or maybe both, it is possible a card like this could see play in a standard equipment deck. I doubt it, but the potential is there. Either way, you should be kneeling and praying to get this in limited because you will probably win. Next up, we've got Treeguard Duo. 1 green and 3 for a 3/4 Frog Rabbit, so another duo. It's going to be really good for both of those tribal decks. When it enters, until end of turn, target creature you control gains Vigilance and +X/+X, where X is the number of creatures you control. Doesn't even care about tribe for that ability, which is really good. Having this on a common that counts as both creature types, I kind of love. I love that these duos just exist for like every creature pairing, right? It's just a really, really easy way to add support for tribal decks at the common slot. You know, more support than you otherwise would be able to with just a single card because it can slot into both tribal strategies. But giving Vigilance and +X/+X seems like it could be, in the right circumstances, that could be like an Alpha Strike win condition sort of thing. So getting that on your common while also getting a decent body seems kind of okay. It's still not going to be amazing, but I think this will see play more than most of the commons we've seen. Next up, we've got 𝐿𝐴 𝐷𝐴. I can't read that language, but it's 1 red and 1. It's Playful Shove. 1 red and 1 for a sorcery, and it deals 1 damage to any target, and then you draw a card. So it's a little bit expensive, but getting to draw a card and then trigger all of your otter stuff, all of your non-creature spell synergies, seems kind of good. So in the right deck, that 1 damage can just kind of be extra, right? You can maybe deal that damage to the opponent, or, you know, kill a token. I think 1 damage in this set is a little bit better than it might appear at first because there are so many tokens, and specifically the Offspring ability makes tokens that have to be 1/1s, so they're all of the Offspring tokens this is removal for. Most of the Rabbit tokens and Rat tokens this is removal for. So this hits and kills a lot more things than you might think, and it also hits and kills a lot more things that are actually very relevant than you would think because of Offspring. There's going to be a lot more things that have 1 toughness that are actually sizable threats because of all of the abilities that those cards will have. So I actually think Playful Shove is a lot better the more I think about it. It automatically draws you a card to replace itself, and it triggers all your auto tribal stuff with the non-creature stuff and prowess and all that good stuff. So stuff. I like the card. Let's move on. The last card of the day is 𝐿𝐴𝐺? I'm gonna say 𝐿𝐴𝐺 just because it sounds better. 𝐿𝐴𝐺 the Shoreless Sea. This is 4 mana, 3 blue and 1 for a legendary elemental fish. It has power and toughness equal to the number of islands you control, so it kind of wants to be in mono blue. Except it doesn't, because whenever 𝐿𝐴𝐺 attacks or enters the battlefield, you put a flood counter on a land. It's an island in addition to its other types for as long as it has a flood counter on it. The first instant or sorcery spell you cast each turn costs 1 blue less or 1 colorless, and it costs that amount less for each land you control with a flood counter on it. So if you attack 3 times and have 4 flood counters on your lands, not only are all of those lands islands in addition to their normal types, so if you are in a multicolor deck, you can turn, you know, your non-island lands into additional islands while still keeping the ability to tap them for that color mana. You can turn things like your legendary lands that are maybe just a blue land but not an island into islands so that 𝐿𝐴𝐺 counts them, which is really nice. But like I said, the more things you have down, if you have 4 flood counters on lands, then your first instant or sorcery every turn is going to cost 4 mana less, and that cost reduction can even be applied to blue costs, which is awesome. I do want to note that you can put the flood counters on your opponent's lands, but they retain all of their other types, so doing so isn't going to take away their ability to generate non-blue mana, which is kind of a bummer. But at the same time, even if you just want to turn on things like Island Walk, you could hit one of your opponent's lands and turn it into an island with a flood counter, just so that all of your Island Walk creatures can get through. I don't see that happening in Standard. I don't even think there are any Island Walk creatures in Standard anymore because, you know, I'm old and that doesn't happen much. But, you know, outside of that in older formats, this could be relevant in that way, potentially. But most of the time, you're just going to use this to reduce the cost of your instants and sorceries by a ton, and also have a big threat that only costs you 4 mana on the field. Really cool card. I'm not 100% sure where it wants to be. Does the Haughty Djinn deck want this? Probably not, although it could reduce the cost of the spells you're playing pretty significantly. I don't know. I don't know where this fits best. I feel like it wants to be indexed with expensive instants or sorceries to really get the value off of that, but I'm not sure. Maybe there's other cards in this set that we haven't seen yet that really care about you having a bunch of islands, and this gets a little bit better, or maybe cares about your opponents having islands so that this gets better. I want this to be a little bit better than it is. As it stands, I'm not sure if it might be too many hoops or too slow for this to really see play in Constructed, but the potential is there, right? You can get a lot of cost reduction on, you know, it's going to trigger every turn. Instants and sorceries are going to cost however much less every single turn, like the first one you play every turn. So there's potential here for sure, especially with how big this guy could get if the game scales on. So really cool card. It's a mythic, so I have to assume they have something in mind for this that's really crazy. And I'm looking forward to finding out what that is during early access. So hopefully you'll join me for that as we experiment with this. 24 hours, that's going to be a crazy stream, but that is the last card of the day. So thank you so much for checking out the video. Make sure you like if you haven't already, because it's every single like that helps this video get out to so many more people. And it's a lot of work to make these videos, so the more people that see it, the better it is for me, the better it helps my channel to grow. So thank you so much for the likes. I do appreciate it. If you're new here, make sure you subscribe. I'm tired, I need coffee. Make sure you subscribe so you never miss an upload. We've got more spoiler content on the way, and like I said before, a ton of crazy deck ideas that we're going to hit the ground running for early access for Bloom Burrow, which is happening on July 24th, 24-hour stream. I'm going to do a marathon stream on Twitch, twitch.tv/QuarantineCapricorn, because if I'm alive and I'm breathing, I'm there and I'm streaming. But all of the decks that we come up with during that 24-hour stream are going to start to hit the channel immediately. The first one is going to go live, the first deck tech will go live on July 24th, the same day as early access, while I'm in the middle of early access. I've got a buddy who's going to do me a favor. He's going to edit it and put it up while I'm still streaming, and then every single day we're going to have a deck tech. For like the first 10 days at least, maybe even more than that. We're just going to pump them out. I've got too many crazy ideas. I can't contain them all in my brain, and they need to be out there in the ether. They need to be on the YouTube channel so you guys can check them out. I know some of you guys have been really missing the deck techs lately because I've been so focused on getting these spoiler videos out, so deck techs are coming back with a vengeance, and they are going to be crazy. They're going to be the typical cap stuff that you're used to, stuff that most people aren't thinking of, and we're going to absolutely turn it up to 11 and go nuts. So look forward to that. Thank you for liking the video. I'll see you next time. Until then. Thanks so much for checking out my channel. I'd like to give a huge shout out to all of my patrons over at Patreon. Without you guys, this channel would not be possible, so honestly, thank you from the bottom of my heart for all of your contributions. If you haven't yet, like and subscribe. The more likes we get and the quicker we get them, the bigger this channel will grow and the faster it will grow. I'd love nothing more than this channel to become something very special for you guys, but it's entirely up to you how fast that happens. Also, if you'd like more deck techs, that's somewhere over there, and if you'd like to see what else the channel's been up to lately, that's somewhere up that way. Also, subscribe, circle below, do all the things.